Hello.
Hey guys, we're just waiting for Greg to get off his last call.
Good, thanks, Judith.
Hey, I'm trying something a little weird, which is what if we set up the room this way?
Could do.
Yeah. I mean, you can't use the camera, so everybody either signs in from their own computers or they use all one.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Can you guys hear us okay?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep, loud and clear.
Greg, will you hand me my coffee?
Open the camera since you have it there.
There you are.
Awesome.
Cool. I'm gonna pull up the agenda here real quick. Okay. Thanks for joining, everybody. So we have a few items on the agenda today, but maybe we can go over action items from last time first. So Judith, thanks for setting up the schedule. And so I emailed the dev list about publicizing API changes, and I kind of like the idea of putting it in writing. So I think I will submit a review request and send that out to the mailing list. You guys could take a look at that. We can just formalize the API review process. I've already noticed emails go out, and I asked Benjamin to send out an email about one chain of his recently. And I think actually I'm realizing now, since I sent that email, how many small API changes get made without any real review. So I'm hopeful that we can get a little more strict about that maybe. And even when we're making smaller API changes, just reach out to the community and see if it's going to impact people. updating the versioning documents. So I started a discussion about this, and it seems like we don't really have consensus. Hey, Vinod.
I'll stand, it's fine.
Sure.
Yeah.
Seems like we don't really have consensus on what we should do yet. I've been meaning to reply to that thread. Just talking about API versioning right now and support. But I think initially I was kind of hoping that we would push more toward just continuing with or trying to actually accomplish our current documented procedure of every 2 months. But after talking with some other folks, I'm kind of leaning in the direction of continuing with what we've actually been doing and changing our documented procedure to match that. Jitao, I had seen that you replied on the thread and you were in support of continuing the 2 month, or trying to achieve the 2 month cadence. Do you guys have a need for a short, or like would a short cadence be helpful to you guys? Or does the current procedure also work pretty well for you?
I don't think have enough enough data to really answer this in a structured way. Like on one hand, people prefer slightly more frequent releases because it makes getting a high priority feature easier, faster. But on the other hand, I know not everyone being able to deploy every version. In our cluster, we actually have a spread of different versions. We are running binaries from 1.1 all the way to 1.5. We have almost every minor version, some kind of format of every minor version running in different clusters. In different clusters. I think that each cluster we keep them consistent, but across different clusters, we have old machines that's really hard to upgrade. So I think being able, I agree with Jie that being able to track this correctly, like really having a correct expectation about when to get next release is definitely important. If we say we want to do frequent and we can do it, that's better. But if we don't feel like we can actually do that as a community, like we need more time to really making sure every release is done in high quality, I'm okay to do is less frequent, as long as what we say on the document actually reflects what we do.
Yeah. Okay.
Just out of curiosity, like how frequent would you guys like upgrade your cluster? I mean, in production cluster.
So we deploy we either do on demand when there is high priority features, or we release the first point fix version. Like for example, 1.4.1 or 1.3.1. We either release that one or do 1.3.0 or 1.x.0, but only if there is some kind of high priority feature there that we really need to use.
Yeah, but I mean that like if we are going to use this, if we are using this 2 month recycle, does that makes, I don't know, will you guys like just upgrade every 2 months?
Every 2 to 3 months. I think there's actually engineers pushing us to deploy a little bit more frequent. Well, I'm actually one of them, but our tooling was not also there yet. And
thank you.
Yeah.
I guess my question in a couple things, like why are we taking water? So Greg, you looked at our previous releases in the last year or so. So cadence be in what, 3 months?
3 to 4 months.
3 to 4 months.
There was one that was 4.5 months, and that was the longest.
That's the latest one?
Yeah, I think so.
105. That was, we kind of gated it for CSI stuff because it was like a strategic decision we did. For other releases, like, do we have some notion of why it took so long for us? Like, are we trying to, is it just the overhead of release itself that we think it's not advertised well over 2 months, or are we like always trying to block it for some feature to get in and not really doing time-based? when time's coming, we're not cutting, or is it like do you have a good sense of what's the fundamental reason, like why it's taking 4 months? Is it, for example, are we cutting the RC in 2 months, but by the time it actually gets, let's take 1 more month, that's adding another month for the voting and testing, stabilizing of a candidate is happening? Like what's the, I mean, to me, ideally, we should do even faster releases. As long as overhead of doing a release is small, if we can minimize that, because we are saying that people can jump versions, so they don't really have to upgrade to a version that they're not comfortable with, or whatever. If their cadence is 6 months, they can skip 3 versions and jump to it. Like we don't mandate that they have to jump to each version. And for people who want to move faster, they can move faster at least a 2-month cadence. Like if you're going to make it even longer, we're kind of telling people that they have to wait at least that long to get a new feature. But if you do it faster, and then I think it's more flexible for people who want to go slow, they can go slow, because we have a compatibility guarantee. For people who can go fast, they can go fast. If they want to, if they're like startups and they don't really care about making sometimes a staging cluster or whatever, if their cadence is like fast. Like for example, Twitter, you should do every 2 weeks. But that's because we had a lot of Mesos expertise in-house, and we kind of knew what went in. So that's another extreme. So I'm, like in my mind, as long as the burden of releasing, which I think is still not optimal, I think it's still, I think Gilbert, you can talk about the latest release, it probably took like a month, if I remember correctly, for him to get an RC candidate out and get it voted in and found bugs and fixing them, and then do another RC and cut. All of this took like a month or so. So I don't know if you want to spend time trying to optimize that, like trying to figure out how to make it even faster, or do we want to just say, okay, maybe we'll do 4 months now, twice as late.
One concern I was raised on the meeting is about having frequent releases was that we would have to backward
more. Yeah, I guess that also like our backport's harder these days. Like right now we're backporting to 3 releases, right, 3 branches. Has that become an issue? Like are backports getting harder to do, or do we have some sense from committers when they're backporting stuff to releases, older releases? The number of backports that they're doing, has that non-trivially being increased with the number of branches, or is it just simple, like it just takes like a few more minutes?
Gilbert has some recent experience backporting some changes. I mean, I think partly it just depends on the particular case. This was a particularly difficult case, I think.
Which one?
Yeah, it really depends on, as Greg mentioned, like, so for now, if we backport to 1.5x, it's straightforward. But like, if we backport to like 1.3, it might be some conflicts we have to adjust. For example, there's some like style change, some like further improvement. So those gonna be some change all the project in most of the component. So we have to adjust those small conflict. But for example, if we in 1.3 and 1.4, we have some process changes. We have some like loop implementation. We have some like repair, implementation of repair in the process. So if any of the bug fix leverage those process features, so we need to backport the process changes, which is kind of painful.
Did you also backport to 1.2?
So right now 1.2 is not under the community maintenance, I believe.
I think we for internal branch, but not on Apache Mesos, just for Mesos for internal 1.2 because of our customers. But officially, we only did for 1.3, 1.4, 1.5. So just to be sure that you guys understand, that problem would not be solved by doing frequent releases, because our support period is based on time. So it would still be 6 months going back. So the amount of code churn that's there in the project will still be the same. I would imagine it's the same difficulty. Even if you did just 2 releases instead of 3, there might still have been that process change that you need to account for when you're doing backporting to that 6-month-old release. You might have to do it once instead of twice, maybe. But the amount of code churn that's going to happen in the 6 months, which is our end of life period for a release, minor release, is still going to be the same. So you still need to do that backport to that older release. So I don't know if it's going to really bias that much in terms of reducing the backporting burden due to the complexity.
I think people are afraid of it increasing the burden, not decreasing the burden. Like, right now we have just 1.5 releases within 6 months. We're supporting more, but like the guidance said, we should support just the last release according to that. If we follow the 2 months release,
we have to do 3.
You have to do 3.
We were doing 3 for a long time now, more or less.
Yeah, I think we've continued doing 3. We're supporting longer than 6 months in general at this point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in that sense, yeah, our slow cadence is increasing our burden right now because I think we feel obligated to support 3 versions, even though that spans longer than 6 months at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I guess roughly it's supposed to be 3. I think we're trying to do .1, .2, and .3 for every release. So at least that's like .1 is, I guess .1 should be like month. Yeah, so.
Yeah, I think that's also, I don't think we've been sticking to monthly
patch releases either. Yeah, I guess my fundamental question for people who have done recent releases is like, what's fundamentally taking a long time for us to get a release out? Is it just the Jira wrangling and voting and testing it out? And is it taking like I know Gilbert spent like 2 sprints probably this time for 1.5, like exclusively trying to get the release out. That's a lot of time. Two sprints is like a month of full-time work to get a release out. That to me is like crazy. If that's the amount of time it takes to cut a minor release, like we can't do more than once every 4 months or so. It's like 1 month overhead for one full-time person. Doing a release is crazy.
Yeah. Gilbert, can you share what it was that took most of your time?
So basically, I would not say it is full time to being a release manager, but it is something like you have always to check back periodically. For example, like for most of the time, it was blocked by brokers. We have new brokers, and once some broker was fixed, then we have some new bug, and then people would define that bug is definitely a regression, which we have to fix for the release. So that part might be the biggest part, which we have the release delay, and I don't feel like it has been happening for not just for 1.5. It has been happening for a couple releases, and like. So I think we have some conclusion before. It is like one way to fix this might be like we cut out the branch as early as possible if we really plan to do the release, and then we should like cherry pick and define the broker. If we don't have any broker, try to cut an RC as soon as possible. So one thing I did not do well last time is like I should have cut the RC1 as earlier as possible, but I have been like waiting for a couple of features to finish.
Yeah, I think 1.5 was a little weird because I think we decided to pay for some features to get in, like the CSI and storage related work of operational feedback, strategic reasons, right? I hope that's not the case going forward. Like for every release, I hope you're not like doing that, because if we're doing that, we're just doing feature-based release. It's not time-based. Like at that point, you're just not true to the philosophy that we want to follow. So if you think 1.5 is an exception, if you take 1.5 out of data points, should see how we did 1.4 and 1.3. Like how long are we taking to cut a release? What's the release burden? And I think that kind of tells us a little bit on other ways to improve that, or is that just the nature of the release for the foreseeable future? And then we say, okay, given this burden, we can only do so much every release. Maybe it's once in 3 months, once every quarter. I don't know. That's how I would look at it.
Yeah.
But like to me, in an ideal world, given our backwards compatibility guarantees for minor versions, I'd like to do it more frequently. If the release burden was approaching to 0. But since it's not approaching to 0, since it's like not trivial, sounds like, we need to find a balance there so that people are not getting burdened out trying to do a release.
Who were the release managers for 4 and 3 and 2?
You can take a look at Jira to see that. We capture that in Jira.
Yeah, but it might be nice to just sync up with them and see what their holdups might have been.
Yeah.
I think I kind of closely follow the release channel and release discussions, and my anecdotal thinking is that we always kind of get delayed because we're trying to get features in. We're not truly trying to cut it. Like we say, oh, okay, this feature is just like 2 more weeks of work and it's a really important feature and you want to block a release.
Yeah, I think that's generally true.
And that's why it's late. I mean, if we really want to solve this problem, we need to be strict about the fact that it's time-based, it's fine, it's one get another. I think it's like a chicken and an egg right now. It's like people want to get it in because it's taking longer because they think, oh, if I don't get it 2 more weeks, then I have to wait 3 more months or 4 more months for the next release. That's what it typically takes, and so that I can rush it in and block the release. And if it actually happened every 2 months, they would probably say, okay, there's 2 more months, I'll just wait.
Yeah.
It's okay. But now they're thinking, if I don't get it in 2 weeks, I have to wait 4 months, so I'll block the release and get it in 2 weeks. So it's like a chicken and egg now.
Yeah, and another thing I would like to mention is like it is really a balance between like whether or not to try to include some specific feature into one specific release. Because like once we land some feature for a release, and I can see it's around the moment, around the week, I almost gonna do the cut for the 1.5. Most of the broker bug, at least some of the broker bug, they are from the new latest feature which we introduced for 1.5. So it's more likely we have been finding out more and more new feature bug if we wait for that feature. So which is another factor would make the release delayed.
Okay, so I think we can continue this discussion. I want to be respectful of Jitao's time. I know that you have another meeting you have to get to, Jitao. Do you still have time to give us a brief overview of your resizing proposal?
Yes, I can do that. I can leave around 11:50-ish.
Okay. Then I would propose that maybe we switch to that now, and we can come back to the release discussion later if we have time. And we can definitely continue that discussion in the ongoing thread as well.
And maybe one other related thing, maybe we should do a release working group.
Yeah, there is a lot to discuss.
Yeah, and also could use that as like when you to do burn down meetings for release. Like right now, it only happens right at the moment when we cut the release. It's probably better if we do it every 2 weeks. The release managers are tracking the dashboard right from the beginning and trying to get to the blockers and talk to shepherds and stuff. So it's probably a good way to also improve releases. Like we don't do release management at the end.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Every time to cut.
Yeah, so I put down an action item for myself to send out an email gauging interest about that. I think that's good.
Cool.
All right, Jitao, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. Yes, I'll share my screen from here. Okay. Can you see this?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, so this my item is mostly about reviewing the new API that I'm proposing to add to support resizing or persistent volumes. So I'll skip them. So the background is that we added persistent volumes about, I think at least 2 years ago, but user were never able to resize the persistent volume once it's created. Uber has some really high priority tasks that we realized this caused a lot of disk space waste in our cluster because we cannot really sizing a persistent volume correctly in the very beginning of a database launch. So we want to add the API support to this thing. And the estimate is that this will be much bigger than our entire compute team's annual salary. So we decided to really fast track this. Yeah. So the API part here is mostly just one offer operation as well as the operator API.
So resize persistent volume, this is after the volume gets created and start getting used, you want to resize it?
Yes, so the decision is that, right now, currently the decision is that after the volume is created, when no task is using this volume, we will allow either the framework or the operator to resize the volume.
Okay. For operator, how would they know if a task is using it or not?
I think we will have validation for this. So first, we are not supporting shared volume. So that means if a framework wants to resize it, framework has to have an offer. And by having this offer, it means nothing is using this volume right now.
It has to get the original volume in the offer for it to resize it?
Yes. For the operator API, I guess we need to have validation. I think there will be validation code checking that this volume is not being used by any task of any framework.
Okay. Yeah, I guess not just validation, I guess probably also want to show some data in the API for operator to actually even know whether the volume is in use or not in an easy fashion, instead of just trying and getting an error.
That's the same problem as unreserving a reservation that someone's using, right?
So but today I think they can hit reservations endpoint and see if the reservation is in use or not, right or not?
They could figure it out. Yeah, I mean, I think they could figure this out as well, no?
I think people can figure things out from the operator API as long as there's no risk condition, assuming there's no risk condition happening at the same time. And I think the operation will see an error at validation. I think the operation will see an error. So if the task is being used by other thing, but if the volume is used by a different task.
Yeah, I'm just saying we should also thinking about both reservations and volumes, like an API endpoint where it tells you whether it's in use or not, like an easy way to see instead of trying to get state endpoint and see all the tasks and see if they're using any or something like that.
Yeah, actually, there was comments mentioning about the get volumes call already written, but let me try to find it in a different patch. It's pretty funny, but actually that call was never added there. We put it in operator API's comment.
Okay.
Try to find, I think this operator, no, this is not operator API. Oh, sorry.
There's a get volume, which has that information.
Tab, which is pretty interesting here. So this is on the destroy volumes. So there were, I don't know who wrote this comment, but the comment said it can be verified by sending a get volumes call, but that call was never added. I think I said I'll follow a follow-up task on myself to add this volume inspection APIs, and they'll come back to here, but it's not urgent to do right now.
Okay.
So going back to the design of the new API, right now the proposal in my email is that I think so. First, I think it is. We believe that we definitely need an original volume as a resource object in the API because we need to reliably know that the framework is offered as an original volume. So I think the difference is mostly about how to express either the addition or subtract part of the resize. So I can think of 3 different options. One is express the size difference as a resource object, which should also include correct allocation information, reservation info, correct raw that the resource is being reserved under. A second option would be simply put the difference as a scalar value and omit all the additional informations. For the persistent volume case, they can still be inferred out because it has to be consistent with the volume. And the third would be express the target volume in the resource format. So for the API, for the framework author, this would mean they will take the original volume, make a copy it, change its quantity size, and put it in the second field of the API. So
I guess that's a deal. So you chose number 2 instead of 3.
Actually, my initial patch took number 1, and the Chun suggests that number 2 might be more easy to extend to the CSI case. Is that right?
Well, actually, so I actually have different opinions for grow volume and shrink volume when selection between these options. For shrink volume, I feel number 2 is easier because, so we just specify that either the net space we want to free or the target size is okay, but we can let either the agent or in the future the resource provider decides what would be the resulting free disk looks like. It can be another path disk, it can be a raw if you are shrinking from mount disk. It depends. That's the reason that I would suggest that we don't specify the target result. But for grow volume, I have a different opinion, and that's why I feel it's better if we can split resize into 2 different calls. So the difference between shrink and grow is that shrink takes 1 volume and create 2. And for grow volume, we take 2 input volumes and want to merge them. And yeah, Zitao said it's easy.
Sorry, wait a minute. Is that clear to everyone why shrink takes 1 and goes to 2?
Actually, I would say shrink volume takes 1 volume, make it smaller, and then release the new things in some possibly unknown format. It could come back and reserve the resources for the persistent volume case. For CSI, I don't exactly know how that part will come back or whether it will come back.
So for CSI, it may return like a raw disk resource representing storage pool. Or if it's
my feeling is it may not always come back, will it?
Yes, but it depends on how the CSI plugin reacts. So it can, at least we will return the original persistent volume back with, but optionally there may be some like byproduct, like the new free resource like served back as like other type of resources, or just path. It's also an option. And but for grow, like I said,
breaking up.
Yeah. What?
You guys are breaking up quite a bit, both you and Jitao. I don't know if it's on our end or your end.
Huh.
It's kind of hard to make sense of what you guys are saying.
Okay, is that better right now?
No?
Okay, let me try to connect through my phone.
Well, what are the other ones? Like, we don't know if it's in our end. Can you hear him fine?
Gilbert and Ben and Meng. Are you guys able to hear Jitao and Chun fine?
We can hear good. We can hear good.
Yeah, it's good on my end.
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe the Wi-Fi phone.
Please wait a minute.
You're in necessary Wi-Fi?
Yeah.
Okay.
We could try and switch to the guest network.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're okay at the moment.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, yeah.
I still did not follow what 1 and 2? The grow takes 2, shrink takes 1. What? I don't follow that.
Okay, so my point is that I have echoes. Sorry. Let me drop off my computer. Wait, how do I leave this meeting? I got it. Okay, let me continue. So for shrink volume, my thought is that we take a persistent volume and pass that into either the agent or the resource provider and ask whoever to shrink it. Optionally, there might be a byproduct that represent the resource of the freed space. And it's up to the either agent or the resource provider to present that resource. It can be another path volume, or it can be converted to raw volume in a CSI plugin. So that's why I suggest that for shrink volume, we should take the input resource, but with an additional size, either the target size or the free space you want to remove shrink, and let the agent or the resource provider decide what are the result looks like. But for grow volume, my opinion is that the grow volume takes the original persistent volume as well as an additional resource. So we took these as two inputs and tried to merge them. And for persistent volume, yeah, as Zhitai said, for the agent default resources, we can infer that the additional resource must be of the same type of the persistent volume we are going to grow, except that it doesn't have any persistence. But in the future, if we want to use the same call to extend, say, a CSI volume, we may take a mount volume as well as a raw storage pool resource and ask the CSI plugin to grow them. So in this case, it's no longer true that we can completely infer the type or the other attributes of the additional resource we're going to use, unless we specify the whole resource pool above. That's why I'm leaning towards we have the two separate calls and have slightly different signatures for these two calls.
So can you explain for the shrink volume why option 1 cannot work?
Well, option 1 actually, in option 1 you are specifying that what's the it's essentially you are specifying what's the result of the freed up disk, right?
For the persistent volume case, yes. For CSI volume,
Check that here. It's hard to see.
We might be able to plug it in.
So persistent volume, that is the case. For the CSI volumes, my argument is, are these calls not going to be symmetric? Say if you can make a volume plus a difference and make a new, if you cannot take, I mean, what I'm trying to achieve here is try to make these two calls more or less asymmetric to each other. Because I think otherwise the framework author will have quite some confusion about how to construct these calls. Yeah,
but if these we're going to use a symmetric calls, then we can actually go use James Peach's idea about just one single resize call. But if you just want to reduce the complexity at all, like the complexity of the framework developer, then one call, one resize call would be sufficient. But there's a limitation is that, well, it cannot specify what we cannot specify the types of additional resources we're going to use in the future. So it's not that future proof. And I could imagine that in the near future, there will be a CSI call corresponding to this, and we will introduce another set of API that have very, very similar function, but with another name and specifically for CSI. And I don't think that's good.
Yeah, I agree. It would be nice to avoid new calls just for CSI. And so if I understand number one correctly, we would just express the size difference as a resource. So we still don't have to, we don't have to specify the resulting resource that comes out of the operation. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate.
Well, that's true, but then why then we are actually passing a lot of useless information in the call, right?
Yeah, I guess one question I have about number one, if we specify the size difference as a resource, what information other than the scalar value of that resource would be used?
Yeah.
So for the persist volume case, I think if I would be the framework author, it's going to be like I make a copy of the original volume, clear the persistence part, change the size, and append it onto the object. Either that or I scan through my offer, find a resource object which has some kind of matching information, append it into there.
Wait, I'm sorry, what was that last bit about extra information or?
Oh, no, not extra information. I think I would be scanning through all the offered resources, looking at a resource object which is type disk, has corresponding reservation information, but no persistence. I don't think it actually makes the framework author's life much easier.
Right, they kind of have to construct this custom one-off resource.
I actually think the scalar one would be is very straightforward to program. The common case they could hit is they did not really have the resource they want to grow, so we would reject this call. But in that case, they would have that problem anyway. At least the part of constructing the call would be the easiest.
Yeah, but for grow, I feel like we should have a richer representation. As I said, we may want to grow a volume from a raw disk resource rather than just the same path. So imagine that if we are going to use the CSI thing, and if our resize only accept the size format, then that means the framework developer need to first issue another call to create a path volume from a raw disk resource with exactly the same type, and then use this call to say, okay, now I want to merge. And another scenario is that, say, if the current offer or the current agent contains either both raw and some path disk resource, if we don't only specify size for growing a volume, we are losing the ability to say, I want to grow the volume from this particular resource or that particular resource. And another point that G pointed out in the review of that patch is that we also, by making the call, the resource, making it clear that these resources are input resource, and we can do validation that we want to, do all just let the framework select which resource you want to merge, and let the master do all the validation to check the types, and other things. That's why I think for grow volume, it's more future-proof if we can have full resource, we can specify the full resource protocol for the additional, not just a size, a scalar.
Yeah. So let me keep this here. So let me ask this. If we take option one, would you also take option one for the shrink call?
I feel for shrink, it's just, I don't feel the need to have them completely symmetric, to be honest. If we don't want to make them symmetric, then I would say that we just have one single resize.
What about allowing both possibilities? We could have an optional scaler for resizing just normal persistent volumes on default agent resources, and then an optional resource for resizing CSI volumes.
Honestly, I'm not sure if we do that, the API will be easier to use comparing to just two different sets of API.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Yeah, so basically, I feel like Jita and I disagree with symmetric versus probably like future proofness or yeah.
So I mean, my feeling about making the shrink volume also taking difference as a resource is that if we think we can grow a volume and the addition part into a new volume, then seems like people should, at least mathematically, people should think that if you take that new volume state minus the so-called addition, which becomes subtraction, and you could kind of get the original volume back. So I'm also looking at all the three combinations here, wrote out here, to see for a CSI volume, if we shrink them, would the resource come back in this format?
Can you say again? What's the last question?
The last question is, for the three things Jay list out here, volume, if volume is a root disk, path disk, or mount disk, would the difference also coming back as the same resource object?
For mount, definitely not. We definitely will, because mount is like unsplittable. So it's definitely like the for mount resource, if we want to shrink it, it will come back as a raw resource.
But that's the case, right? That's like you said, if volume is a mount disk, addition should be a raw disk from same resource provider and same profile. That means if it's a mount disk and we shrink it, we should expecting new raw disk, a same raw disk from same resource provider and same profile coming back as in a different resource object in the offer.
Yeah, it's a different resource, but it cannot be inferred prior to the call because it's dedicated to the plugin to figure out what would the results resource looks like.
I see your point.
Yeah. Anyone want to make some comments? Yeah, I feel I wish we could reach a conclusion, finalize the API, maybe today or as soon as possible.
I'm personally okay to make them not symmetric, as long as we document the rationale somewhere in the user doc. Say the API is a little bit strange, but this is because once we go to CSI format, how to do things. I also think these explanations are useful for framework author themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I've seen framework author not really struggle, but got confused about how to construct this object to be passed to us.
I see.
Yeah. So is the proposal then that for grow, you would specify, or Chunhung, I guess I'm asking you, are you proposing that grow would specify the volume that you start with and another volume that you're consuming to grow that?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that seems good to me. Are there any issues with that approach, Jita, that you see?
No, I think it's fine. Actually, in our code base, grow and shrink rarely happen at the same time. And I think our framework authors say they expect the same volume only be either grown once or shrink once in this life cycle. Mm-hmm. It's mostly like whether they overestimated how large the product will look like or underestimated how much the database will use. So I think they may even have different workflows about the different APIs. So I think in terms of implementation, they may get. I think they need some clarification. We should write good comments to explain not only what each field should be, but also why this is chosen this way. And with that, I think they should be able to accept that. Hello?
Hello? Yeah. Yeah.
Hi.
Actually, hello? Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah. So if you actually want to make this call symmetric, I think it's okay. I think I'm okay with like making Flink also accept a resource protocol as a difference. It's just that we were going to just extract the size and nothing else. So it just seems a little redundant to me for shrinking volume, but if you feel like it's way easier for a framework developer to have a symmetric, maybe it's okay.
I don't think it would be significantly easier. I think this actually affects operator APIs more, because for operator APIs, I've seen people handcraft out JSON object to send to us. That's where the really mistakes happening. For the framework APIs, everyone writing Mesos framework, most of them are using strong type language where they generate bindings. Their API will, if they did the wrong thing, it's not like their code can even compile.
And what about if we make them symmetric and allow shrink to take a resource, we could document the APIs such that we explicitly tell users, you just need to give us a disk resource with a scalar size, and that's all we're going to pay attention to. Just send us any disk resource with a size, and we're going to use that size to shrink your volume. And that might be one way to kind of eliminate difficulties that operators would have in constructing the call.
Mm-hmm. So that means if I constructed something, use JSON to construct a grow volume, then I can just copy that section into a different JSON object, which then transforms into a shrink.
Well, for grow, I guess we might want them to actually give us explicitly the disk that's going to be consumed.
Yeah, but for shrink, because we ignore the extra information, they will still work.
Yeah, right.
I'm okay with that too. I feel like that makes the API a little bit beautiful. Looks a little bit more beautiful.
Yeah, you like the symmetry, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, if we did make them symmetric, would we just want a single call?
I think so. I think even with a single call, we still need a rangeable volume. And I think the problem with single call is then it's really hard to know the final state of the change.
And also with a single call, like we still need to explain that, okay, for growing volume, we will expect everything in the protobuf you provide. Mm-hmm. For shrinking volume, we only look at the size and we don't care about anything. And you cannot rely on the protobuf you provide to say that you are expecting a free resource with the same resource protobuf. So we still need all these explanation and to make the framework developer aware of that these two have different behaviors, like have different meanings. These arguments have different meanings. So I feel like if that's the case, probably like have two asymmetric calls. Fits describes their intentions better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I agree.
Yeah. Plus, because I think because the API cannot take the final volume, mostly because user may not know what the final volume looks exactly like. They need to do a volume and a target, and they can use the size difference of target. Never mind.
Yeah, I think the way we're describing it, I don't think it would actually work to have a single call for both of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so I think then let's go with the that would be option 1. But in the shrink volume case, we only look at the resource type, which is disk, and the scalar value, and ignore everything else in validation. Are people okay with this proposal?
Yeah, I guess if we're not going to have a single call, the symmetry doesn't. I don't see a strong motivation to shoot for that personally, I guess. Like to me, that would be the motivation to make the inputs symmetric. And if we're not going to achieve that, then I might say just go with the scalar value.
Okay.
Yeah, what do y'all think?
No,
No.
Okay, I think that's fine for me. Yep.
Yeah, I guess my opinion is if it's 2 separate calls, it doesn't have to be symmetric either. Not that I really know, but it doesn't seem as important if it's not going to be the same call.
Okay, and so for the operator API, that would the 2 calls will be the with the same fields with the extra required field of the agent ID.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
But if you make the agent ID required, then what happens if it's an external resource?
I think even external resources are still scoped under, external resource, sorry.
Yeah. We were going to add support for external volumes and ERPs. I don't know if it will be tied to an agent or not.
So in that case, I think we need either agent ID or external resource ID, right? One of them has to be true.
In our cases where, yeah, we have like an agent ID that's optional or a resource provider ID that's also optional.
But exactly one of them has to be set.
Yeah.
I think I've seen previous precedents of say create a field that's required but later extend that to optional. I think that does not break anything from a memory, so we can consider that path or just make agent ID optional from the very beginning. But say I think without the external resource provider ID in that message, making agent ID optional does not seem reasonable to me. Because then people will be confused to say, do I need this? They will likely ignore that while constructing the object, but then got an error.
I mean, if you make it required now and then relax that, then you won't be compatible with future clients. That's the only thing that will break. If someone sends in the future something without an agent ID, old servers will break or old consumers will break.
Yeah, I guess in my mind, we mitigate that difficulty for operators by documenting the API well and providing good error messaging.
Okay, so we can make it optional with a comment say, this is required as long as you are working on a persistence volume or a local resource provider. But once we add support for external resource provider, then the external resource provider ID will be, one of them should be set.
Yeah, we have similar comments already for like in the reconcile case, and I think there's an ordinary API as well.
Can you point me the API of the reconcile case? Which call it is?
Yeah, it's called reconcile operations.
Reconcile
Reconcile operations?
It's in
reconcile.
Proto.
Okay, Okay, I think so. Let me take a quick look on that. I think we probably can take the same convention if we already have a precedence.
We don't have a good comment there, actually. We have to add one there. But if you look at acknowledge operation status, that one has a good comment, and we should copy that into the reconcile one as well. So the acknowledge one is a bit odd.
Okay. Can you message me? I think I need to go, but I'm okay with that too. And I think that seems like a. So let's make the agent ID optional for now, so we can be more future-proof on these two APIs.
Yeah, that sounds good.
We can address whatever you need to clarify in the review I comment.
Yeah, I feel this is just, I think follow the, I think it's good.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And I guess we're actually out of time in general, unless anybody has anything to add at the last minute here.
I'm sorry. The discussion took too long.
Oh, no, not at all. That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
So there are a couple other items on the agenda we can just roll over to next time. And yeah, I think that's all the time we have. Next meeting in 2 weeks. I appreciate everybody showing up. Nice having a chat with you guys. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Greg, and thanks everyone. See you.
Yeah, thanks for presenting, Jita.